Sponsorship is a multi-billion-dollar industry, $63 billion, with an annual growth rate that has surpassed advertising and other forms of marketing, including public relations, direct marketing, and promotions. However, this steady growth in spending does not necessarily mean that you're more easily going to find and secure and retain valuable sponsors. To discuss how creators can capitalize on this growth, we have with us Larry Weil, president of The Sponsorship Guy. Welcome, Larry.
Thank you.
As a sponsorship engagement strategist and customer acquisition specialist for some of the nation's most recognized brands and over $200 million in sponsorship transactions to his credit, Larry will help us to uncover the secret to winning in sponsorship. In a recent ESP survey, it was stated that more than half of sponsors said they plan to end a sponsorship prior to the contract term, a 28.8% increase from the previous year. So things are getting worse. This has created a difficult position for event creators to be in, which leads me to my first question. What do you think is the first step event creators should take in addressing this challenge, Larry?
Well, that's a big question. The important part of this is to remember that there are more things that sponsors have to choose from than ever, and that they're also measuring more than they ever have. And if you get to the mid-season or the middle point of a sponsorship deal and you don't know how the performance is, then you're not doing your job. And so I'm always a little bit perplexed when somebody says, well, we got surprised because our sponsor wanted to terminate the deal early. Usually you should know how it's performing and you should be reporting. And so, knowing what the fulfillment is and understanding their objectives and measuring them, staying in touch all the time, it's client service and management, really. And so there are things beyond your control that can happen, but we're talking about the things that they can control. Companies will run into financial issues and they'll come back to you looking to you. There's nothing you can do about that. But you can certainly understand what their objectives are and make course corrections like you do with any business. And I think the reason that that's a problem is simply because too many venues think they've done the deal when the deal is signed, and they don't stay engaged in the activation and the customer satisfaction and performance.
So the trend seems to be getting worse. Are companies and venues getting worse at demonstrating value and meeting expectations, or is there something else going on?
Well, I do think they're getting worse at it. There's more pressure than ever to make the sale, and they tend to sell the same assets. And so what happens is they're on to the next deal instead of taking care of it. And so very much like in my first answer, the problem is still, it's just compounded by the number of clients that you have to have, the pressure to increase the sales and to get to the next one. So, and then I guess remembering that part of your job is to be a sponsor advocate and to not just be looking at, okay, we made our margin on this one, we need this much to make it go, here's your space, good luck. You really have to stay with it.
Yeah. So thinking about how technology is changing the game, and in many ways, technology can make it easier and a more positive experience for customers. How is technology changing the game and perhaps making it easier for event creators to service their sponsors?
Well, that's one of my favorite topics now is technology, because it's changed everything and it's a little bit slower coming into the event space. And technology isn't just one bucket anymore. It's a lot of different things. There's social media and content. There's measurement. There's technological tools. So some of the more common ones that you see, well, let's start with an oldie but a goodie, okay? Yeah. And that's the event app, right? Everybody has the event app. They feel that they have to have it. But in my experience, most venues are simply using it as a brochure. It has all kinds of ability to connect people, to get information, to gain insights, but they don't use it for that, and they don't track it afterwards to do that. So I think the first thing is to take the existing technology like the event app and say, we're we're spending this money on it, what can we offer to our sponsors that's going to create more value for them? And then the next one that I see is actually the data that you can acquire. There's some really fantastic new innovations where you can, through Wi-Fi, you can start to pull data about everybody. You know, I think we all know, and we've had this discussion before, that the era of privacy is pretty limited now. And so if you've got your phone on, somebody can find a way to get in. If you've got that app in your phone, they can pull information from there. So if you've got Wi-Fi or something like that, there are plenty of services that will allow you to aggregate up the data, not personal data, so to speak, but to say you have an audience of 10,000 people. What apps are they using? Did they take Uber or Lyft to get here? Where did they stay? Where are they from? What do they follow? Those kinds of things. And once you have that information, it gives you two opportunities that are really worth developing. One is you can identify other sponsors, opportunities that you never would have considered. And then the other one is that you can use it to support what you're doing with your sponsor, to show them that your targeting is right, that people actually see or interact, and then they go to the site, things like that. And then the other part of it is at the event, you can have beacons and things like that, so you can see what the traffic is, send messages to people when they're there. I know events where they actually will change where staff is located because they can see that traffic is getting bunched up in an area, and they can change that. So all of that is there, but it also leads into what's your content, how do you align that? So, you know, I like to say that, 15 years ago, if you were doing something digital, all you really did was you gave somebody a link to your website, to their website, right?
Right.
But now you have to have somebody that knows what they're doing, because does your content align with their content? Can you repurpose their content, or can they repurpose yours? So I think that's part of it, is in terms of not keeping sponsors. Everything that I go to in terms of conferences around advertising, that's all they talk about is digital. Everything, and even if they're not implementing it that way, they're buying their advertising and their sponsorship using some kind of a digital platform.
Yeah.
And so you really have to invest not so much in the money, but in educating your team, or pulling people into your team that knows how to best utilize all of that information and to collect it.
So following on with my questions about technology, I'd love to learn more about some of the really interesting technologies that you have seen event creators who are being really innovative in the ways that they think about activations. Can you tell me more about that?
Yeah, I mean, one of my favorite ones has to do with, there's two categories. Virtual reality and augmented reality are very popular. And the difference is that, virtual is a complete setting, augmented is partial. And so the two activations I've seen that come to mind is South by Southwest. McDonald's did a really interesting thing in which they created a virtual inside of a Happy Meal experience. And so people lined up to be able to walk through the inside of a Happy Meal, and they had all these different activities going on with the toys. And the people who were standing in line outside had two things. One is, it was hilarious to watch the person basically in what looks like a green screen room, right, moving around and doing all this VR stuff with a headset on. But they sampled all their new products. They had just released all the new upgraded sandwiches and so on. And so it was a much more interesting way to get people queued up. And so they've been very innovative on that. And then augmented reality, I saw used recently at a car show, in which, how you want to see, everybody likes their car a little different, right? So you're starting to see this in more shopping opportunities where I want to see the car in a different color with different wheels on it, or with a different configuration in terms of a roof rack or whatever it happens to be. And so you still have one car, but you can let them play with it and custom design it. At one of my clients' conferences that are coming up, they're going to be demonstrating AR, where you can stand in front of a mirror like you're in a retail store, and instead of actually trying on all these different outfits, You choose the outfit, and it shows you in the mirror what you would look like in the outfit.
That's cool.
And so I think that has a lot of far-reaching consequences.
Yeah, yeah. Now, if the McDonald's experience, you could smell the French fries, that would be, I think, the ultimate.
Well, they were
probably.
sampling out there, so
Were they?
yeah.
So maybe you could. Yeah. So much of a sponsor's activity has been around the activation at the event,
Yeah.
but digital and technology has opened up the doors to creating a longer relationship. Can you tell me a little bit about that?
Yeah, no, that's a really important point. So many, and this could come back to the crux of why aren't people renewing. If your sponsorship is a one-off in the eyes of your sponsor, then that's a lot of pressure on a day, 2 days, 3 days. And then it also means that the sponsor has to go look for stuff to fill up the rest of the year, right? So depending on if you are a sponsor that wants to be at concerts, there's a whole calendar of concerts for you to go around to, and you move around the country and you spend your money on that. But the truth is, so how important is repetition? So if you have digital and you can get the email addresses, or you can through your app get information about what the attendees' favorite things to do, how much time do they spend on Facebook and so on, it helps them to channel what their other marketing efforts are going to be. And then you can create content. You can get subscribers around that, and you can stretch it out. And depending on the nature of the group, we were talking about a membership organization recently where they have people that are returning all the time, but they have events. So again, this is not just a one-off now. If you can take content and create content that is of value to them, to continue to reach out to the members or the attendees or that audience that they're really interested in, that's a great way to use digital assets.
And then perhaps leveraging the data to demonstrate to clients how building those relationships is contributing to business impact in a different kind of way.
Right. Well, it's interesting. We were also, I think the example of a client I had who did some data extrapolation around a Major League Baseball team. Major League Baseball is always worried about millennials. Millennials find baseball boring. Well, other people do too, but and so they're not getting there. So how do we understand millennials? Well, if you've got data about what they're doing on their phones, which you can do now, if you log into the Wi-Fi at the stadium, what you're going to end up getting is information on what they do. Where do they shop? What apps do they have on their phone? How do they like to communicate? Are they bigger on Instagram or some of the different instant messaging things? So you can help direct your sponsor towards other activation styles. Okay, here's where our people are. Here's where they shop. You thought they were here. Now we know they're there. Or you can also use that information to identify other sponsor opportunities. Yeah. So, for example, one of the things we found that stunned us is that half the people who were at a baseball game in a 13-game test were shopping on their mobile phone during the game. And that 20% of those people were shopping at Wayfair. I mean, it's Wayfair? Really? At a baseball game? I get Amazon. So there's a whole new thing where you can pursue Wayfair to be a part of it, but what does that also tell you about the people that are there? So if you can find out who Wayfair's customer is, there's a lot of things that can spring out. I mean, data just provides this, there's too much information of what we do is anecdotal. It's, oh yeah, I went to this event, people are this age, or there's this many guys, and so on. It's really much better. Data is where the CMOs are today. They get a lot of data on television advertising. They get a lot of data on digital advertising, and if you don't have some of that to give them around what you're doing in an event, then you are going to be at a disadvantage when they're deciding how much they're going to allocate to events and how much they're going to allocate to not events.
Yeah, that's interesting. You need the data just to be competitive.
Yes.
From a sales perspective, what is the new mindset for sponsorship sales?
Well, I think the new mindset, and forgive me because some of this is things that should be obvious, but they need to be restated sometimes because they're too important to let them go. And the most important thing is to listen to your sponsor prospects because they will tell you what they think they want, and then you can get them into a conversation You call it, there's lots of sales strategies about how to do that, but until you actually hear it from them, you don't know how they acquire their customers. What's the most successful channel that they use to acquire new customers? Do they need to demonstrate product? Do they need to sample product? Do they need to share content? Do they want to drive traffic to stores? And there's too many folks do this thing. I knew a guy once who used to say for his clients, he said, everything's good for everybody. And I go, what do you mean everything is? Well, all of my things I represent, anybody could use those. And I go, that's not true. Everything's not a great match for everybody. And if you think that, you're going about it in the wrong way. You can't just send out your proposal or your deck and let them figure out how to do it. You have to help them to figure out how to best use what you have.
Yeah, and that reminds me of a conversation we were having earlier today when you said when a salesperson or a marketing person that's trying to sell a sponsorship starts off with, let me tell you about all the stuff that I have to offer, it's an immediate dead end. So understanding their needs and addressing those with the solutions you've got sounds like what you're talking about.
And part of it is that, and again, I'm going to harp on sales skills because I see a lot of people spend time putting together a beautiful presentation. But really it's all about them. It's here's what we have to offer you, here's how much it is, here's all this. You have to get your value proposition in the first 5 or 6 seconds, and that requires study. The hardest thing to do is to sit here and say, how do I take this giant event with all these things and squish it? You want me to tell somebody about that in 3 or 4 seconds? Well, no, you're talking about what's the value. We help engage this audience. We reduce costs X. We worked with your competitor and doubled their sales or event population or whatever it is. That's what you have to be able to do, because they have so many priorities that if they're going to carve out some time for you, you better have hit something that resonates with them, almost emotionally.
Yeah, yeah. And so that's the strategy for getting someone's attention and just getting them, as you said, to listen to the first 5 seconds, make it relevant. What about in terms of creating a long-term relationship with sponsors? What are some of the tactics that you've seen being used today by the successful folks in selling longer-term relationships that they can get even greater leverage out of?
Well, and I know that this is another one of those things going back to the basic things, but you have to be able to have a true partnership. And I know people say that and then they don't do it. But this is where we talked about once you've sold them in, how often do you talk to them? Do you have a regular status meeting? Do you talk every couple of weeks? Do you report on how it's going? Are you honest if it's not going well so that it can be fixed? They have to trust you. I have found in all the time I've been doing this that I also don't, and this is key, I don't call them with stuff they don't need. Okay? I respect that they're busy. I don't feel an obligation to take every opportunity that comes my way to every potential sponsor. Because what happens is they go, oh, it's Larry again. Man, he pitched me everything that comes down the pike. I just don't want to talk to him. Or is it, I haven't heard from Larry in a while, but the last time I talked to him, now I do things to stay in front of them on LinkedIn and all that so they don't lose touch.
Yeah, yeah.
But that's the other thing is there's the passive way of doing that. Can you create inbound?
Yeah.
So if you're putting out information about your new clients, your projects you're working on, how can, the best deals I ever do is when I pick up the phone and say hello because I've done something to get somebody to, and they self-select it in.
And you built a brand.
Yeah, so you can, that's one of the things, if you're doing it right, your phone should ring.
So shifting back to targeting and outreach, something you said earlier has made me think a little bit about how event creators maybe need to be thinking a little bit differently about their outreach efforts. Mm-hmm. So with regards to email, do you think email will continue to be the future of sponsorship outreach? Or do you think email is had its day and it's just too many things in their inbox? And
there's so many problems with email. I just, you can't eliminate it because I mean, the first thing is that I found today is, and we were talking about this before, some people never answer their voicemails. Some people don't like to read email. If I want to talk to my daughter, I better be willing to text. Okay? So first thing is you need to have all of those things because you don't know in advance what their preferred medium of communication is. And that includes social. You could make an initial contact through LinkedIn, find something in common, but a cold email without a, and it's not even, you don't even get to the body of the email. It's the subject line, and you better have it formatted for mobile because, how much of the subject line shows on mobile. So if you're, getting to you're getting far off on here, you should really want to, I tell people they need to think almost more like clickbait in their subject lines. If you can't get somebody to open that up, it doesn't matter what's in there. So certainly it has to be there. But I also think that, that nothing wrong with the old personal introduction. Attend things. We were talking before about, I go to my local advertising federation meetings. I go to the Integrated Marketing Association meetings. People who are out there learning more. And the last thing I'm going to stretch this out into because it's so critical is triggering events. Yeah. You have to stay, by the time you read in the paper that Geico has done a deal with so-and-so, and you say, oh wow, Geico's doing deals. That already happened that year. Some of them plan a year in advance. Yeah. You need to be out there all the time. You need to be understanding what's coming. When is the product launch? They have money for product launches, always. Yeah. But if you wait until the product launches, you're done. Yeah. So research into triggering events is critical.
Great. So let's look to the future of event sponsorship. Predictions. What is your prediction for the most popular sponsor activations of 2018?
Yeah, I think that VR is going to continue to grow and be huge. It's getting better. There's a lot of platforms. People line up for it. I talked to a guy who's very successful with VR, and he did a lot of stuff at Comic-Con that, the TV networks were making it so you could be inside of the TV program for, I think it was like American Horror Story or something like that. And cool. They put you in a morgue with the thing over your body. I mean, it was crazy, but people will queue up like nothing for that because it's so new and it's so immersive. Now, if you're doing a good job of connecting the brand back, for a TV show, that's fantastic. I mean, who wouldn't, if you're a fan of a show, want to do that? But some kind of an engagement experience will be just because of how it's presented. It's like the McDonald's. Do you really not know what's on the inside of a Happy Meal box? It's about the experience. And so I think more unique, especially AR and VR experiences are really going to lead the way. And hopefully the price will start to come down a little bit too.
And I think what's really interesting about that Comic-Con example is that it was so engaging and so funny that it went viral as well. So it reached an audience way beyond the walls of Comic-Con.
Really good point.
So last thing, just maybe top 3 most actionable tips for event professionals to secure their ideal sponsors for their events.
Okay. Number 1 is have an asset matrix. Don't be hemming and hawing or sending somebody a 20-page proposal when they're ready. When they show interest, you have to be ready. You don't want any time to elapse. So you need a media kit. I talk to a lot of properties that don't have one. And you need to distill it down, all of that down to a page or 2 pages. Because again, people don't read. And this comes back to that big mistake that everybody makes. I see this in going through and trying to edit down stuff. They're so afraid that if they leave this one thing out, that's going to be the one thing that they really wanted, and somehow the deal's going to go astray. But it's the exact opposite. You have to, funnel them down to the final thing. And so if you keep it short and sweet, make sure the alignment is right, that you're talking to the right people, that you clearly explain the idea. Sort of the last tip about that I tell people, here's the benefit of not putting everything in the presentation, they have to talk to you.
Well, imagine that.
So I always say the point of me sending them something is to get them to talk to me, not to close it. I can't send you a deck. You're not going to call me up and say, hey, I just got your deck. Where do I sign? It doesn't work like that. And so you're going to be much happier. Give them something to talk to. Give them something, but make it so that you can engage them and learn and actually help them. I think if you keep that as your biggest focus, is that you will profit if you do a good job for them, and make it bite-sized so that have respect for their busy environment. What you're doing is important to you, but it's not yet important to them.
So make it. Yeah, great. Larry, thank you for your predictions. Thank you for your time. Your tips on technology, targeting, relationship-based sponsorship, I think are innovative and leading edge, and I think all of our viewers today will find a lot of value. I know I did, so thanks so much.
Well, it's been great talking to you, Dan. Thank you.
All right.